Is progesterone the trigger for ovulation rather than estrogen? Let's look at this paper, which is quite an interesting paper. And the question that this paper answers is that it challenges the long-held belief that estradiol is the primary trigger for LH surge and FSH, leading to ovulation. Instead, it proposes that probably progesterone holds the key as a trigger. So it's not a single study, but a review of analysis of existing research as well as observation. Now, what it does, it examines various studies that question the role of estradiol in triggering ovulation and presents evidence supporting progesterone as a primary trigger. The authors also propose a mechanism to explain how progesterone can act both as an ovulation trigger and as an ovulation inhibitor. So if you look at the result that they came up with, they said that progesterone was better positioned than estradiol to be the physiological trigger. Now that comes as a shock because I've traditionally believed that it's estrogen that starts the positive feedback. But think about it. We are using progesterone as an inhibitor, as an antagonist, and that seems to work. So clearly there is some role there of progesterone. Now, they argue that progesterone levels rise about 12 hours before the estradiol peaks and the gonadotrophin surge. A single injection of progesterone can trigger ovulation. Progesterone stable levels during follicular phase, because they're absolutely stable, is a more reliable signal than estradiol, which keeps fluctuating. And there is a possible mechanism linking progesterone rise to follicular readiness for rupture. Now, what is the implications in practice? It is recognizing that progesterone as a primary trigger could lead to new strategies. One, ovulation prediction. Monitoring progesterone levels may provide a more accurate ovulation prediction rather than tracking estradiol alone. Fertility treatments, progesterone administration could potentially be used to trigger ovulation in some fertility treatments, possibly offering an alternative. Development of contraception, understanding progesterone's dual role in triggering and inhibiting. Diagnosis of ovulatory disorders, which are abnormalities in progesterone sensitivity, could be investigated as potential causes of anovulation. The timing and dosing of progesterone administration and fertility treatments could be tailored to individual patients as per their hormone profile. And this paper opens up more research possibilities for the future. So what does this do? This paper highlights the importance of questioning established thoughts and processes. The role of estradiol has been accepted for decades, but new mechanism has been presented. It emphasizes the complexity of hormonal interactions, not just about presence of hormones, but their relative timings. The author proposed a novel explanation between progesterone's role in triggering ovulation based on dosage and timings. The reason why estrogen may not be the primary ovulation trigger. One, inconsistent estradiol levels. The paper points towards estrogen levels varying widely from cycle to cycle, from patient to patient, and variability makes estradiol less reliable and inconsistent trigger for ovulation. Lack of mechanisms linking estradiol to follicle rupture. There's no clear mechanism that links the rise of estradiol to follicle imminent rupture, making it much more difficult to explain that estradiol could be a more reliable marker. Experimental evidence that suppression of estradiol with letrozole throughout follicular phase does not affect ovulation timing in menstruating women, and boosting estradiol levels by tenfold does not induce an LH surge or ovulation. Timing discrepancy, the paper mentions that during ovarian stimulation, supraphysiological levels of estradiol levels are reached early in the follicular phase and do not trigger ovulation, even before starting the antagonist. And this suggests that high estradiol levels alone are not sufficient to trigger. So let's look at their thinking about why progesterone is proposed as ovulation. Consistent levels. Progesterone levels remain stable throughout the follicular phase and little cycle to cycle variability. The consistency makes progesterone a more reliable signal. The timing of progesterone surge, the paper cites a study showing the progesterone surge precedes both the estradiol peak and a gonadotrophin flare by about 12 hours. The timing is as progesterone as a trigger. If you look at the experimental evidence that a single intramuscular injection of progesterone can trigger ovulation, direct cause effect supports this. A mechanism linking progesterone to follicular readiness, couple the rise of progesterone with follicle readiness for rupture, spontaneous luteinization of granular cells, or increased constitutive progesterone production due to changes in follicular environment. And that's even without an LH surge, you could have early luteinization. That's the role of progesterone. Signaling pathway, that rising progesterone signals the hypothalamus to progesterone A receptors, which are known to modulate GnRH pulsation, leading to release of FSH and LH. So in conclusion, by proposing progesterone as an ovulation trigger, the paper offers a new perspective on the hormonal mechanisms of controlling ovulation. This hypothesis could potentially explain some inconsistencies observed with traditional estrogen-centric models and may lead to new approaches. And that's something pretty new.